Hello and welcome to the Estate Planning Toolbox. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to check out everything we have going on here. My name is John Connor and I am an attorney in the Trust and Estates Group of Graves Doherty, Heron and Moody, a law firm located in downtown Austin, Texas. This podcast is a client-focused podcast covering various estate planning topics, including wills and trusts, powers of attorney, corporate entities such as LLCs and limited partnerships, probate administration, and everything in between. Thanks very much for stopping by. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Estate Planning Toolbox. Today we're actually going to be talking about some legislative updates that recently came down from our federal government. Just a couple of weeks ago, they passed what they are calling Tax Reform 2.0, and I wanted to talk about that with you, give you an overview of what that is and how it might affect you in the future. But before we do that, let's take a look at today's movie quote of the day, and it is a fairly famous one, I think. It is "To infinity and beyond." I think that quote is pretty easy as quotes go, so I do hope you know what it's from. But if you don't, stick around until the end of the podcast, and I will reveal what movie that's from. So looking now at this Tax Reform 2.0, really what this is it's a collection of three separate bills that recently passed the House of Representatives, and it really is in a lot of ways a continuation of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was originally passed back in 2017. That is the big tax reform that came into effect January 1 of this year and resulted in many, many changes across the board in terms of taxes, in terms of estate and gift taxes. That is why we have the incredibly high lifetime exemption amount in place right now, is because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And just so I don't have to keep saying the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act over and over again, I am going to refer to it as the 2017 Act going forward in this podcast. So the first bill that makes up this Tax Reform 2.0 is the Protecting Family and Small Business Tax Cuts Act of 2018. This act would apply to many of the tax changes from the 2017 Act that applied to individuals and would seek to make them permanent. That would include the lower marginal tax rates from an income tax perspective, also including the higher child tax credit, and would seek to make permanent the increased exemptions amount to the estate and gift tax, which, as we have talked about, is $11.18 million per person or $22.36 million for married couples. Again, those exemption amounts and a lot of these tax rates and credits are all due to sunset on December 31st, 2025 and revert back to the 2017 rates on January 1, 2026. And it is this Protecting Family and Small Business Tax Cuts Act of 2018 that would actually seek to make those rate changes and those exemption amounts permanent. The second piece of Tax Reform 2.0 is the Family Savings Act of 2018. This would make several changes to retirement accounts and general savings accounts in the United States. It would remove the age limit for making IRA contributions of 70 and a half so that you could essentially always make contributions to your IRA. It would exempt certain individuals from actually having to take required minimum distributions from their retirement accounts. Currently, everyone is required to take required minimum distributions, but under the Family Savings Act of 2018, individuals with less than $50,000 in their retirement accounts would not be required to take any required minimum distributions. It also creates a new type of savings account really for retirement, and it's called a universal savings account, and it would have a similar tax structure to a Roth IRA, but would allow $2,500 to be set aside on a tax advantage basis for any purpose, not just retirement purposes. So that's also an interesting part of this Family Savings Act of 2018. The third part of Tax Reform 2.0 is the American Innovation Act, and this is designed to encourage people to start their own businesses. And the way that they're going about that is allowing new businesses to deduct as much as $20,000 in startup costs in the year that those costs are incurred. That could be a very significant benefit for potential new business owners, so we'll want to keep an eye on this as all this moves forward. So what's next, and how is this going to affect you? In all honesty, it's probably not going to affect you, and if it does, it's not going to be anytime soon. It's just now passed the House of Representatives, and all indications seem to be that the Senate is not going to spend any time on this. They're certainly dealing with a lot of issues right now in the Senate, and many of the senators see tax reform as not the biggest issue they have right now, so it doesn't look like this is even going to get debated on. Additionally, none of the bills have a lot of traction with any of the senators, be they Republican senators or Democrat senators, so it doesn't seem like there's even necessarily going to be the numbers to actually pass this all the way through. I do think it would be important to check back in on this after midterms. If either one of the parties is able to make significant ground, then maybe there will be some tax changes to actually talk about. But as of right now, Tax Reform 2.0 and the 3 bills that make it up really don't result in much more than maybe some interesting reading. But there's certainly not anything that I think needs to be worried about right now, or that would require you to update or even necessarily review your planning at this point. But let's keep an eye on them, and of course we'll check back in on these after the midterms. So just in summary, Tax Reform 2.0 passed the House in late September. It's essentially kind of a continuation of the 2017 Act. It seeks to make a lot of those changes permanent, but it does add some new things, certainly. But again, it doesn't have a lot of traction in either party. The senators have no inclination to debate this, much less vote on it at this point. So not anything we need to worry about right now, and we'll just have to keep an eye on this and see if anything changes after the midterm elections. So now that we've talked about Tax Reform 2.0, let's take a look at today's movie quote of the day, and it is from Toy Story.
To infinity and beyond!
Hard to believe that came out so many years ago and that was Pixar's first movie, but there it is, and thank y'all very much for checking out today's podcast. As always, here is my contact information. If you have any questions or want to see any particular topic discussed on the Estate Planning Toolbox, please do not hesitate to contact me. But until next time, thank you again for stopping by, and check back soon for our next podcast.